Hi, I'm Katie of Dandelion Doily. I love making tiny embroidered jewelry. I would like to talk about the basics of what you need to make miniature embroidery. I hope that it will help you feel confident in whatever you decide to use in your practice and in your craft. The basics of what I need fit in a small tote. And I find this a great way to store things because they don't get dusty inside. You can keep track of them. All of the little pieces could be all around your house. The embroiderer's worst nightmare is a needle in the carpet or in the arm of the sofa. Guilty. The good thing about tiny embroidery is that it's very compact. It's great to just have in a corner of your house somewhere. And it's also really nice if you want to travel, having everything kind of in a tote. One of my absolute favorite tools is a pincushion. This is my star. This pincushion was gifted to me by my fashion and textiles teacher before I even did embroidery. I believe it's made by Dritz, and it's really handy because it sits flat, which is helpful. It stores lots of needles, and it's also got a spot in the middle for your embroidery scissors. I love being able to stitch and then just really quickly be able to place a needle or grab a needle, grab scissors. I love that everything is just sticking out of this pincushion. I also really cherish this sweet little pincushion that my embroidery friend, Miss Kiki Embroidery, made. It's hand embroidered. That's miniature embroidery. How gorgeous. But you can find whatever pincushion works for you. An alternative is what people call a Needleminder. You can place magnetically onto your work and it holds your needle magnetically. I prefer not to have anything else on my embroidery because while I'm stitching it will get caught, but you could have this somewhere else. Next up in my tiny embroidery tote of essentials is scissors. Embroidery scissors are meant only for snipping and cutting floss. You cannot cut paper with it. You shouldn't cut fabric with it. It's just very delicate. These are my absolute favorite embroidery scissors. I've talked about them before on my channel. I sell them in my shop as well, but they are my edit undo stitch cutting scissors because they have this little divot that you can get under a pesky stitch and snip it out. The entire blade is sharp, so you can easily just like snip embroidery floss. Like, it serves multiple purposes. I also love that it's stainless steel and very lightweight. I have purchased other embroidery scissors in the past, and this is my pet peeve. They're heavy. Like the classic stork scissors, so cute. I love them. Great for cutting floss, but it's just kind of like heavier. It's heavier than just the light weight of this. These are cute. They're colorful. They're so chunky and heavy. So just be wary whenever you are buying embroidery scissors. Sometimes it's fun to collect them and you can just kind of find your own favorite one, but these are my go-to. These are what I wish everybody in the world who does fiber arts or needlework has. Also on my pincushion, I have a few different needles. I have like a ridiculous amount of needles, but I only stitch with like 4. So you really don't need that many needles as long as they don't snap or break or get lost. My favorite needles are just basic embroidery needles. That means they're sharp and they have a little bit wider eye than some other like sewing needles. In my embroidery kits, I include 2 embroidery needles. They're very similar, size 7 and size 8 embroidery needles. I find those to be good sizes for the miniature embroidery that I do and what comes in my kits. I'm also a really big fan of chenille needles. They are a type of needle that is sharp and it also has kind of a longer, wider eye, but it's still really slim and thin so that it's just very easy to go in and out of fabric, to split stitches, to thread. I think it's kind of a superb little needle. Another essential is embroidery floss. In the United States, it seems more common to have DMC floss. There's also Anchor that I believe is kind of more available in other parts of the world. Embroidery floss comes in skeins or skeins. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation. I say skein, I think. It looks like this, and when you pull from the embroidery floss, you always want to pull from the side with the number. You can pull and it will come out easily. You also need to decide how you want to organize your floss. You can just keep them in skeins, or you can put them on clothespins. I decided to do that early on in my embroidery hobby, which was fine, but I do regret this a little bit because I have no idea what number these are. So if I'm like, oh, I want this color again, I kind of just have to take this clothespin to the store and try to find it again. Another way to organize your floss is on something called a bobbin. You can have these kind of plastic totes that organize your floss, and that's really nice to be able to see quickly. The majority of what I'm working from in my floral embroideries is this wad of floss scraps. These are all kind of like the appropriate length, like 12 inches to stitch with. They're all ready to go. And so what I like to do is I keep a jar in my tote that just, I can keep this monster in and be able to like pick it out when I'm ready to stitch a different element onto the embroidery. And I can kind of just quickly eye what color will work or what I like and be able to pull from this scary monster, use up all these scraps. So that's my method. Do you think that's gross? I don't know. Also inside my scrap jar, I kind of keep other small tools that could be helpful. For instance, I use some like marking devices to make sure like what I'm stitching is the correct size. Or I also keep coins. A penny is the same size as like a 20 millimeter size, so I can use the penny to kind of eye if like that's the correct size. And a quarter is the size of like a 25 millimeter size. And these are also helpful if you want to trace the boundary of where you should stitch into. Frixion pens are a great tool to use if you don't want to freehand anything. You can draw onto the fabric, and so you can trace around one of these coins and stitch into that, or you can draw the design that you want, and then once your embroidery is complete, you can use a hair dryer and the heat will make the ink evaporate and go away. Sometimes there can be a little bit of like ghosting and some lines that are left behind. I personally don't use Frixion pens in my work for that reason, but it's very light, you can hardly tell, and it's a great tool for beginners who aren't confident in freehanding or improvising what you're stitching. You'll also want to have an embroidery hoop. And my favorite type of hoop happens to be what you'd call a flexi hoop because it's flexible. You can just easily put your fabric onto it and it just like kind of catches. Some people don't like flexi hoops because, I mean, every once in a while after you stitch, you do have to adjust it to make sure it's like taut. Flexi hoops that are just like cheap on the internet, I don't like them. They're very poor quality. The stain or whatever they use didn't quite set, and it's sticky and it gets linty, and also it leaves rings on the fabric. So just be wary of like these cheaper flexi hoops. Nerge is a good brand if you can find it. Whenever you're at Goodwill or the thrift store, these vintage flexi hoops are where it's at. I love these. They're great quality. I prefer to go with a smaller size. It's too big for me, too intimidating. Also, these are nice for displaying, but I just twist this off and it comes off, and that's how I stitch. Other traditional embroidery hoops that have like this mechanism on it, this will probably keep your embroidery tighter on the hoop, which if you like that, try something like this. This is a simple bamboo embroidery hoop. This is what comes in my kit. They work fine. So that's about it for the items that are actual embroidery related things that go into my embroidery tote. The rest of the items are like environmental items. One thing you really need for miniature embroidery is good lighting. I recommend sitting by a window in the daylight, stitching. It's miserable to stitch in the evening and not have a good source of light. You can't tell colors apart very well, and it just strains your eyes. If you want to stitch for a long time, you should treat your eyes very kindly. If you are a night stitcher, which I tend to be, I highly recommend investing in a good lamp. The lamp that I have is the Stella 2, and I love it. It sits right next to like my stitching spot over the arm of my couch on a little stand, and you can just tap it on. There's 3 different light temperature settings. I tend to go with like the warm light. It helps me see the colors more accurately in the evening. It also has like a flexible neck so that you can position it exactly where you want, like a dentist, you know? And you can make it brighter or dimmer. I usually always go to the brightest and just keep it on warm. But it's a super handy tool. If you are looking to invest in your hobby and your craft, I think that's one of the first things you should consider investing in. The last tool that I'll talk about is an embroidery stand. I have held my hoop proudly for years. And if you haven't stitched this way for years, I really don't know that you should invest in an embroidery stand, just because they're more of a nice thing to have rather than something you really need in order to perform this craft. A stand will kind of take any strain off of your wrists or hands, which I, over the years, have started to have a little bit of pain just like gripping and, you know, having something in my hands for this long. So my stand does relieve some of that. The stand that I have is from W Stands. My stand is called the Sequoia stand, and it's a floor stand. It's so beautifully crafted. I love having it as just like a piece of furniture in my house, but it's quite pricey. I do have a 10% off code. It's Dandelion10 if you're interested in making that extreme purchase. If you do make the investment, it can be worth it if you plan on having a lifetime craft. However, there are lots of other cheaper stands on the market. So that's about all the tools in my toolbox and the other ones around my house that I would call essential embroidery tools. I hope this gives you kind of an idea of what you'd need to get started, but basically all you really need is a hoop, some fabric, some embroidery floss, needles. Embroidery is a beautiful craft that you can interpret in many different ways and make your own and find your own favorites. Please let me know if there's anything that I missed. If you are an embroiderer and there's something that you just have to have in your embroidery tote, I would love to know so that I can hop on board and see if I like it too. Thank you so much for checking out what I use, and I hope to see you in another video. Sincerely, Katie of Dandelion Doily.